adesso parli tu,
No, se Fabio ti chiede la parola, gli dici di no.
Dove passiamo?
Eccolo là.
Per passiamo non ci prende.
Credo che... Dove sta Piero? Scusa. Ah no, ho sbagliato io, scusami Piero.
No, no, ma è uguale.
No, no,
Io
Basta
sono
avere una serie in più.
no, no, perché non ho fatto caso.
Svela. Ok, perfetto. Ok,
Sì, sì,
mi sta?
te lo davo questo. No, però che conosco. Non a memoria, non so. 17.
Ma c'è una strada sotto mano, sono preparato. Aspetta che lo prendo, ecco qua. Queste sono le domande. So, good afternoon to all of you. I really would like to thank you all for your attendance here. It's been quite interesting. Also, unfortunately, I was in another meeting yesterday in the Netherlands on another topic, so I heard that. Buonasera. As I said, I was saying that I was unfortunately in another meeting yesterday, but I heard that you had very interesting discussions. And for what I understood this morning, also the presentations have been quite interesting, and so this is a very good, let's say, starting point also for the discussion in this outstanding panel today, and which is a sort of a closing session of this 2 days expert meeting. I have to say that. We heard a lot and from different standpoints, and for sure, one of the main point was that I mean, at least what I capture from the discussion this morning is that we have to deal with so-called big data issue or topic, which for sure extends to space data, as we heard. And also, I would like to add that in a way, astronomy and space science data are also, at least from our standpoint, I mean, from the standpoint of the United Nations, science data and space data are really less affected, space science data, by security and market interests, which for us is quite an important feature because, for example, yesterday I was together with Marquisio, by the way, in a meeting talking about space resources and space mining and so more on the commercial side, and we were discussing the legal side of it, among other topics. So in this case, we are less affected by security and market interests, and if, for example, we compare this field with, I don't know, remote sensing and Earth observation. Again, this is our standpoint, so the standpoint of the United Nations. So we have also to consider that the main source of funding for these activities and relevant, so all the activities relevant to the Open Universe Initiative is public money. And the potential of this data for education and inspiration, and also its disconnection from sensitive information, is another side at which we are looking with carefully. So we do believe that the results of all these efforts in space science and research have to be made available to everyone. You have here the quite a famous, let's say, picture, which is the summary of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. For the ones of you who are not familiar with that, in September 2015, the United Nations, we had a summit in New York, where all member states of the United Nations approved the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, which is organized around these 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which is a sort of an agenda for all the 193 member states of the United Nations to be followed by 2030 in order to, to have in 2030 a sort of a milestone where all member states will check themselves and see how good they've been in trying to fulfill these global objectives. So this is our, let's say, baseline for all our activities. So in a way, at least for the Office for Outer Space Affairs, together with other mandates that we get directly from the Secretary General, directly from the Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space, directly from the General Assembly, we have also to fulfill this mandate coming from the UN as one. And the main let's say, mantra, the mantra that we have, which is going across the board, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, is that at the very end, our final goal is to use space data and space infrastructures, and also, everything we do, and also space technology and research, to fulfill the Sustainable Development Goals so that no one is left behind. And this means that we look at the spacefaring nations, we look at the developed countries, but mainly we look at the developing countries. And that's something that we have to keep in mind every time we talk about initiatives that are under the umbrella of the United Nations. So this initiative, the Open Universe Initiative, the main goal is to provide access to data about our universe. And this is, in our opinion, a key element for the advancement of humankind's shared knowledge. And what we want to do is to do it in the most transparent and user-friendly way possible. The idea that we have in mind, just to give you a simple example, the idea is that the growing community of citizen scientists and the general public should be able to visualize and interact with space science data and derived services in the same way that applications on our smartphones make interaction with GNSS, Global Navigation Satellite Systems, and weather satellites products seamless. So what we want to do is really to have the general public able to use space science as a tool for education. And as you can see, one of the Sustainable Development Goals, in particular number 4, is quality education. There are a lot of other SDGs which can be relevant for this, but for sure number 4 is quite straightforward. This morning, Professor Marchisio mentioned Unispace Plus 50. So allow me to give you a little bit of, let's say, some information, background information on what Unispace Plus 50 is. In June 2018, we are organizing this huge event, which is a special segment of the session of the Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space, open to all member states. And why it's called Unispace Plus 50 is because it's celebrating the 50th anniversary from the first Unispace conference, which was held in Vienna in '68, and at the same time is looking at the upcoming 50 years. So what we would like to do, I would say for the first time in history, we would like to create and put together with member states and with all the potential stakeholders, we would like to put black and white the future vision, the strategy in outer space activities for the United Nations. So it will be a special event, as I said. The last global event under the umbrella of the UN for activities related to space was 1999, which was Unispace 3. So we have 20 years now, which have been through which, if you go, 20 years ago, and look at the situation, for sure it was quite different from the situation we have right now. We have now more than 1,400 operational satellites in orbit, and more than about 65 countries having a satellite operational in orbit. When the Office for Outer Space Affairs was created, when the Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space was created, we had just 2 countries, the Soviet Union and the United States of America. Now we are, let's say, around 65, and if you consider that we have 84 countries member of the Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space, you see that already we have a gap that we are trying to cover. As I mentioned, also in preparing Unispace Plus 50, we have to keep in mind, as a sort of background basis for our and sort of reference for our activities, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. So when we set our goals, and when I say our, I mean the global space community, we have to understand how we can contribute in shaping the future of our planet and humankind, more or less for the next half a century and beyond. I mentioned before that what we are trying to do is to engage with all the member states, so the 193 member states of the United Nations, all the permanent observers at COPUOS, but what we are trying to do is also to engage with all the potential stakeholders, also the user communities, which is quite important for us in shaping the best possible, let's say, vision for the future. And so we started last year with the first attempt of doing this, so putting together the UN, member states, permanent observers, and the civil society, as we call it. So we put together what we call the high-level forum, and it's a forum devoted to consider space as a driver for socio-economic sustainable development. It was held in the United Arab Emirates last year, end of November, and it was a collaboration between us, the organization of that, between us and the United Arab Emirates Space Agency and the Mohammed bin Rashid Space Center. It was quite good. We had more than 150 experts from all over the world, also from developing countries, obviously, supported by us and by other sponsors. And we discussed how to proceed. The so-called Dubai Declaration was approved. You can find all the information on our website, so I'm not going in too much details here. But one of the key highlights of the results of the recommendations from the Dubai Declaration is that we have to create and to build the strategy on 4 pillars. And the 4 pillars are quite important because there's a way for governments and member states to deal with space activities in their own countries. And they are space economy, space society, space accessibility, and space diplomacy. So all the initiatives, or the activities, or the projects we are going to deal with, and I hope also the new initiatives which will be approved, again, I hope, in June 2018 at Unispace Plus 50 have to match this vision. And these 4 pillars, in a way, tackle the topics under the umbrella of what we call the Space 2030 Agenda in a holistic way, where the main goal is exploration, innovation, and inspiration. And clearly, as you can easily understand, the Open Universe Initiative really touches each and every one of these pillars. So we do believe, and I have to thank personally Professor Battistone and the Italian Space Agency for having presented this idea already more or less 1 year ago. It was the first time at the Scientific and Technical Subcommittee last year, and then in COPUOS in June, and that also was one of the topics discussed at the Trento meeting. chaired by the Italian Minister for Research. I have to say that it's really quite an interesting initiative because it's going across the board. The four pillars is going really strongly linked to few of our thematic priorities. We have 7 thematic priorities on which we are working in order to prepare Unispace plus 50. For sure, it is under the umbrella, it's 100% fitting under the thematic priority number 7, which is capacity building for the 21st century. But it's also linked to the number 1, which is global cooperation in exploration and innovation. And clearly, then, I mean, during the discussion in the panel, I mean, with the panelists here, we would like to also go a little bit more in detail, on the links between the Open Universe Initiative and the Sustainable Development Goals. So not only the 4 pillars that I mentioned, not only the 7 thematic priorities, but also the SDGs. So before concluding, I would like to underline that this expert meeting, which is a meeting, a step in preparation then of this workshop, the United Nations Italy workshop, which will take place in November in Vienna. This meeting today is really opportunity to start preparing for a final proposal that I have to present to member states in June 2018. In reality, the final documents, in order to be able, because we need to be able to translate this document in the 6 official languages. So for Piero, this morning was having some, let's say, was scared about the possibility that we don't know how to deal with barriers and cultural problems. I mean, for sure, all the official documents will be following the UN rules, which means the 6 official languages. So we're going to reach out more or less, I don't want to say the entire planet, but a huge percentage. And this document, any document and any proposal for Unispace plus 50 must be ready in English by November this year, beginning of December, the latest. And then it will be ready in the 6 official languages on time for the Scientific and Technical Subcommittee in February next year, which will start the official process for the preparation of the final decision in June 2018. I'm giving you all this information to provide you with the clear understanding that we have a very precise process in place. And we do this every single moment of our life. For us, discussing with developing countries and try to see how we can help. Capacity building for us is bread and butter. So, and also the cultural barriers, what they feel they need is something that, again, is bread and butter. So I would like to ask you, the panelists here, to help us, as the UN, to understand what we should include in our roadmap, what we should, let's say, focus on from now up to the workshop in November. What do you believe still is needed in order, to better shape the project, and so on. For sure, we have to involve delegations, and this is something that I'm going to do probably in June. One of the ideas that I was discussing also with the president of the Italian Space Agency. One of the possibilities could be that together we invite member states in parallel to the Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space now in June 2017 to see, to present the initiative a little bit more in detail and see if there is anyone already, let's say, ready to support the initiative either from a political standpoint or even already some financial support. Having said that, I believe this was quite a long introduction. I hope that also some questions which were raised this morning during the presentations have been answered by what I said. If not, I'm ready to ready and open to answer any question you may have. But I will, let's say, go for the question and answer session at the end of this panel. And I have also to inform you that I sent just 2 questions in advance to the panelists here, and I would like to now to start with them, if you don't mind, just 1 second. And I'll ask also the panelists to answer these questions. Yeah. Okay. These questions are, I would say, key question, quite broad. So it's just you can be free to say what you like. I mean, I don't want. I mean, as I was joking with Bruna before, we are very open to every contribution, because that's the approach we have.
You want to have it on the screen?
If you don't mind, if it's feasible, with pleasure. Okay. So, and I'll ask the panelists to answer the questions in alphabetic order, so we don't have any problem. Oh. Yeah, Benvenuti is before. So, Piero, you are the first one. You want me to?
Thank you for.
To read the question first?
No,
Okay. Good.
I had them before. They are very broad, so I will be answering to that, but in a more pragmatic way. Well, first of all, let me say that I'm really grateful to you and Olsa and Asi to have organized this meeting, and also to Paolo Giommi to have presented this initial paper to COPUOS. Since I'm always very direct, when I read that paper, I was getting a bit nervous, and also all the AVO people got a bit nervous because of the way it was written. But in fact, in retrospect, I think that was a good idea, because it created a very lively discussion in these last 2 days. So I found this meeting very, very useful to focus on what we want to do. So let me answer to your questions in a very pragmatic way. With age, I'm becoming more and more allergic to theoretical talks, and I want to go really to the basis of things. So I was asking myself questions similar to what you are asking. What do we want to do? I mean, what is this open universe that should be the flagship of the initiative? I think that we have to answer first 2 questions. Which data are we talking about? I think you already answered to that. We make our life easy if we concentrate on real universe data, that is astronomical data or data related to the evolution of the universe. Because then we don't have any problem with, legal problem or whatever problem, and we have a clear idea what data we want to share and be part of this open universe. I would be a bit nervous to include in that data from Large Hadron Colliders and experiment with that, because of course they are linked to the understanding of the universe. But it become a bit of a Pandora box. So let's concentrate on data about the universe. When we say that, we cannot limit ourselves to the space data, because if I do research about the universe, I have to complement the space data with ground-based data. And this is already happening in the VO, so we have to consider that. And although we are presenting this initiative within the COPUOS, that is the UN Office of Outer Space, we know about outer space also with ground-based experiments. And so I think it is useful also culturally to say that. Then the second question, fundamental question that we have to answer is, what is the target of our initiative? You say the general public. A general public has to be differentiated. And we are talking about the Sustainable Development Goal number 4, quality of education. We cannot ignore the different level of the target that we are addressing. And to simplify things, I would say that we have a research level where the target are people interested in progressing in the scientific knowledge of the universe, and you have the so-called citizen science, or where you want to increase the scientific awareness of regular people. These are two different kind of target and require different initiative to promote them. Then I would say, in progressing on what we want to do with the open universe, the first message that I would say is we have to build on the existing, on what exists already in terms of accessibility to the data. During yesterday, we have listened to several presentations that make very clear that during the past 15 years, we have reached a very good understanding of what should be the standard of the data that has to be had to go into an archive which is accessible. It can be improved, but we already achieved a very clear idea about that. On top of that, there have been a number of implementation of easy accessibility to the data. I just mentioned the two examples that I know best, which is the CDS, the Strasbourg Centre de Données Stellaires activity and various portals that they have defined, or the Canadian Astronomical Data Center. Those are already a very good example of what can be done. It can be improved, but I would suggest not to reinvent the wheel, not to build a third or fourth or fifth implementation of that, because that would be a waste of effort. And I would prefer to concentrate on enhancing what already exists. In saying that we need to enhance what exists, I think that one thing we have to discover which data sets are still missing and not accessible, and include them in the accessibility. When we say that, one part which of missing data that we know they're not there refer mainly to ground-based observatories. It was a very painful route at the beginning, if you remember, to convince ground-based observatories to adopt the same level of standards that space experiments are normally using, starting with the pipeline processing of the data. And some of the big observatories achieved that, agreed on that, and in fact these data are now available, but not all of them. So pushing on the national level to say, if you invest your money in a big observatory, you have also to consider the fact that these data should become accessible, and then you have to conform to the standard, very similar to space experiment. Even if you are operating a ground-based observatory, I think it would be an extremely good value that you add to the. Now, all this is good enough for research. If you want then to open the accessibility of the data to the citizen science, then, as I said before, the data is only the accessibility to the data is only a part of the effort that you have to invest. You have to invest much more in the education and science awareness of the people who eventually will use the data. I'm afraid I don't think there is an easy and meaningful mobile phone application to access astronomical data. I mean, you can do that, but then it would be just, looking at some image in the sky. In fact, I think I was listening to your talk this morning, this morning, and I was comparing the type of data that you are producing with the data that an observatory produces. And I think the damn thing that we have in addition are the images, which looks like the astronomical data are easy to understand. And in fact, the data that we have in our database are much more complex, than just images. And so we have to be careful that, you know, you can create a nice application that show you the image of Andromeda, but if you want to know about the Hertzsprung-Russell diagram of the stars in the Andromeda Nebula, I mean, you have to know much more, and you have to create more sophisticated tools. And that will be useless if you don't know what an Hertzsprung-Russell diagram is. So there is a lot to be done, but it's mainly in terms of science awareness more than accessibility of the data. The data are there, is a minor part. So that is my point, that is coming back to the main thing is the message that we may want to convey to the delegation, at the level of delegation, is that we are talking about this type of data about the universe. We define two different targets, the research type people and the normal citizen, and we have different approaches in collaboration to these two items. Now, the last point, and then I pass the floor to somebody else. Considering that we have achieved already a very good level of accessibility of the data, what is missing in some countries is the sustain or support to the group that are using this data. They are available to anybody who has a computer or network, but if they are not working in an institute where they can share ideas, that they can build up a scientific group, they will remain isolated and in the long term much more frustrated than before accessing the data. So I think that the message to the national delegate is that they should set apart money for people who want to use the AVO and the data. And that will be much more valuable than developing other tools. I stop here.
Thank you very much. Let me say something before I go to Professor Bertucci. Yeah, for sure, I agree that we have to start with, clear ideas on the kind of data we want. So universe data, fine. Then we have to see, different steps, but for sure it's fine. I agree with the fact that we have to complement space data with ground-based data. We have to see how to do it, but still is interesting, and I believe it's important. We never duplicate anything. Our role is to foster partnerships, is to drive the political willingness of cooperate, is to work on with the ability we have to put together developed and developing countries. And therefore, what is available already is by definition of extreme value for this project. It's always true. What is available is always of extreme value for our activities. What we have to consider, however, is that the community, we have to keep in mind that we serve the citizens. So, in our case, we have to keep in mind that we are paid, what we do 24/7 is paid by taxpayers. Taxpayers in developed countries and taxpayers in developing countries. So this is something that we have always in mind, because for us what counts is what the member states want. And therefore, I do believe that the two targets that you were mentioning are quite a good starting point, because we have, say, the possibility to differentiate between, say, more educated people and not the other category, people that has to be educated. You have also to consider that I have a specific mandate since February last year from member states under the umbrella of capacity building in the 21st century that we have to focus on STEM, education in STEM, in particular for developing countries and in particular for women. Okay, I give this information because this is how it's written. So STEM education for women, in particular developing country, which means that in general we extend, but we have also the gender dimension in this. So I will say, as a conclusion of this first round, that for sure the original idea of having a consultation with member states in June this year could be a valid approach, because in this way we check with member states what they have in mind or what they would prefer for us to be put in an informed package. And for sure we need an assessment of what is available, and be assured that again we are not going to duplicate anything, but if there is any gap, if there is anything that has to be considered for further development, we have to do it, and what we do is to look at the overarching strategic framework that is needed for this kind of activities. So my next panelist is Bruna Bertucci.
I could say that in principle I agree with the previous speakers, and it's fine. Now, in the sense, I was putting this, I think, also in my talk, in the sense that was not even clear to me what was the target. So it was a really nice your introduction on the subject. Then I'm not inside the astronomic part. So as I heard all the talks these days about an observatory, another observatory, the first impression to somebody that is not in the field, because I mean I'm a poor cosmic ray physicist, so nothing to do with X-rays, gamma rays, ground observatories, is there are so many. So if I would be, and I am, a not aware person of the field, where should I knock the door? In the sense, when you want to educate people that are not in the field, that are not commonly using astronomic data, how do you make a lot of data available to the public, but how the public can decide what is the best place where to go to pick this data? You were mentioning the CDS, CADS. I've heard about the International Virtual Observatory Alliance. I mean, for me, these were all brand new concepts in some sense. So, I'm unaware of the problem. Where should I knock the door? Where is my reference point to enter this field? This is something I miss. And this is, I'm not a completely uneducated person. But if I go on the web, both in developing open platforms or developing virtual observatory, is plenty of stuff. So the starting point, I perfectly agree, the starting point should be the existing. But in some way, the existing should be clear. Okay, I want to come closer to the field, where should I knock the door first? Because if you have the same data in 10 places, why you should choose one and not the other? When you have too much information, you have no information, in some sense. This is my first naive. I don't know what is the solution, but I would get lost in the middle of all this data. Because if I have to do something, I go to the SDC, because it's my home. But nevertheless, I know that then there's BSDC that has many of the same information, then there will be another observatory and the other. Maybe it's the one that is collaborating with my institute. My naive impression is that there are clubs, and each club does not speak, or just speaks with the other, but pursues his... but this is my only naive impression. But it seems to me there are clubs. There are clubs also in open data projects. You have RDA with respect to another... I mean, and until we have clubs that are developing tools and access, you will never get shared real view. Because then if I knock at the club, no, you're not on the club. So this is a naive comment maybe. And I don't know if to be effective in this roadmap, to understand, okay, the existing, we have a good collection, and everyone here has his piece of information, but what is the peculiarity of each existing site, at least? Because if I see I understand the mirrors, but if I get the same information in 10 places, I get lost. This is my naive. It's not like this, but it's my naive. And probably the end user is naive at the very beginning. So this was my first comment. So I've learned a lot of things. But I think that to learn in a coherent way, there should be a global view presented to the not expert user. The second point is the target, because I think that in this case, the goal is to put the fourth SDG is to put quality education. And quality education, it seems, is not then you're paying taxes in order to perform experiments, in order to increase science, but then here the objective is not the scientific objective of the experiment, but to educate people to science in space science. So the organization of data for a researcher is not is in this project or not? This is a question. This is my question. We are trying to organize open access to improve scientific research that is valuable by itself, or the target is really citizen. If the target is really citizen, then we are missing something in this meeting that is not completely, which are the most effective way to discuss science with citizens. We have seen very few applications of this. And this, I think, I was mentioning master classes or the International Cosmic Ray Day that we organize from time to time. There were some example of use of public archives in universities. We were learning about these challenges for apps. But these were all my points.
Okay, so thank you, because it's quite interesting. Yes, when we discuss the two targets, indeed we have the scientist side and the citizen science side, so the education side. But you're right. Probably in these 2 days we focused more not on the first one, but for sure not on the second one. So this I took note, because this could be one of the topics that we have to discuss internally, to see how we eventually can organize something with citizens, with the civil society, to understand better, but also with member states, as I said, because sometimes, and I was discussing with Enrico, and one of the point was that Enrico mentioned, he said, okay, but we need to know, they need to tell us what they need, so that we can then present the data that they need. But sometimes my experience in other fields is that when you go also top level in a government and you present what you can do, and then you ask them, okay, but what you need, so I can help you with capacity building, with training, with technical advisory missions, I can do a lot for you, but you have to tell me, your government, you have to tell me what you need. And the answer very often in developing countries, in real developing countries, is if you don't tell us what you can give us, so which kind of solutions you have already on the table, we cannot tell you what we need. And that's the answer that more or less 80% of the times I receive back from top level people in developing countries, even members of the Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space. So, and this was, I mean, for example, this was clear, as exactly crystal clear as I was just reporting now. The last time happened with the head of the civil protection in El Salvador. He told me, I don't know what I have to ask you if you don't tell me what you have. So that's the reason why another project that we are putting together is what is called the Space Solution Compendium. Because in this way, it's a long process. We are going to start just right now. We will have an important event in Graz, in Austria, at the beginning of September. By the way, with also some contribution from the European Space Agency. And frankly, this has been revealing from a certain standpoint, because, yeah, it's easy to say that they have to tell us what they need, but sometimes they don't know, because they don't know what we can offer. And I see Gail is, I believe you agree. One point, we, the Office for Outer Space Affairs, the UN, we are used to have global networks. For example, in disaster risk reduction and emergency response, that's what we do. So we do training, we do capacity building, and we built a network for the time being, 22 centers, which are mainly civil protection centers, nationally owned and managed, but trained by us in using space-based data and infrastructure in the management of disasters and emergency response. So we are used to this kind of approach. We are not doing their job. We're just training them to do their job properly. And it was in October last year, and I was not in my office, and I received a phone call from my office in Bonn 10 minutes after Hurricane Matthew was on Haiti. And I'll tell you just, this is an example of how it works. The president of Haiti called the president of the Dominican Republic. The Dominican Republic has a wonderful, well-established center in its national civil protection, which has been built thanks to us, thanks to our training. So the president of the Dominican Republic called my office in Bonn. They called me, and I called Roberto, because I needed some support from Cosmos SkyMet. And this was before CNN announced that Hurricane Matthew was on Haiti. So just to tell you that the system works. The next speaker I have is the chief scientist of ASI, Enrico Flamini.
Thank you. Thank you, Simona. Thank you all. I think that the points that have been raised by Piero in some part, and mostly I would say that I agree with Bruna for some points. But first of all, let me say that I believe that Open Universe Initiative has a vision, and this is in any case important. It's a vision that has to be projected into the future, and that of course has to start from the present, and in this sense has also potential to support also scientists. I'm referring to what Bruna was presenting this morning about cross-fertilization and cross-relation between different scientific words. This is something that we normally experience when we navigate on the web. You need some kind of help in navigating, even if you know what you want to achieve and you want to looking for, but then you need to have a screening between different offers, focusing on what you actually need, so to have guided somehow in that.
Yeah.
At the same time, I think that it's even more important if you have to spread the awareness of the advancement in astronomy, and that is from ground indeed, and in space sciences. And by the way, Piero, let me say that the more some kind of science is advanced, the more the integration between ground-based instruments and space instruments are important. Exoplanet is one of these typical examples. We cannot think to have a good achievement in a space mission without a solid relation with the ground segment. It's one of the reasons when we approved PLATO, we asked explicitly to have an agreement with ESO. Otherwise, we knew. And the same, very likely, is what we are discussing or dealing with gravitational astronomy. I mean, you cannot really decouple the two things. The more we advance, the more we see it. And also, I think that we could foster the access to controlled and sanctified scientific data. Again, Bruno, I take a few points of your presentation because were inspiring to me. I mean, certified data is an obligation in some parts. The part that, at least that I know better, the planetary scientists, you cannot put anything in PDS or PSA if it's not certified. And this is an obligation that the scientist has. I don't know if this is the same everywhere, but indeed, I do believe so, by the way. But I have not this kind of knowledge. But I think that it's important to have scientific data because on the web, everything is present. And most of the information are far to be realistic and scientifically certified. And this is a benefit to all. And of course, it's even mostly to developing countries. Because if, the level of the culture can help you in navigating properly in the web and avoid false, fake news or something like this. If you're not well educated, and we see it every day with fake news, then you can believe it in what is, absolutely not a scientific truth. And I think that this is something that this initiative can help to support. I don't think that anything alone can solve an issue. Is supporting, growing, so forth, but not one tool per se can solve completely an issue. Then this also means that, please, we have to recall that we are in the information society. And again, this not necessarily implies that we are informated enough. That is another point that we have to consider. Coming to the specific question that the question number one, you pose us is, I think that we may help in two ways. Consensus on specific points that can be building blocks later on, and maybe manpower, because if I look the data on November 2017, I do think that we cannot just have this meeting today and then going away altogether. We have to somehow continue to work on it.
Thank you. So I agree. There's nothing I I can add. So my next speaker is Andy Pollock. Andy, do you want the micro?
Less than shouting. Good afternoon. To me, Open Universe is about data, which fuels services, which fuels science. And I'll read again a slightly edited version of what I said yesterday. Services in astronomy and space science will expand rapidly in the immediate future. Not only will life become easier for professional and student scientists, but many new people across the world should be able actively to participate within their own cultural contexts in the work of cosmic discovery. Smartphone apps are going to be central to this. Nevertheless, it's a long and complicated road between instrumental raw data and an app running on someone's phone in an unusual part of the world. We're a long way along this road already. The VO, for example, for a shining example, provides many of the way stations along the way. But there are always things to do, especially when the world has changed. The world has changed. The world has changed with the introduction of the smartphone. So the man in the street, the sexist man in the street, is now replaced by the person with the smartphone in the street or wherever else. The smartphone is the key. a smartphone app will build on what we've got already. There will be a lot of hard and incredibly interesting work to do to go from the stuff that we've got at the moment to something that can be shared the world over. Everything is about adding value, and software is about adding value. Software apply to data and make something new. So, and it's our job to enable collectively these developments. I have a much more positive view of the person with the mobile phone than has been expressed by the other panelists. I think that everyone is capable of understanding a lot. You make your way through life, and there's the famous 50% rule. Wherever you go, 50% of people are clever and 50% of people are not. And this is true. Well, it may be. Yeah. And therefore, I think people will be able to take their smartphone apps and observe the universe with them. Of course, it's our job to get from where we are now to there, but we have to reconstruct that path via drilling down with Wikipedia and other sorts of things. But we can do it, and we are the ones that have got to do it. And this will be done either by the people that do it now, or, as we heard this morning, by the disruptors. We have to be disruption ready. What can we do to prepare our stuff for the enormous community of people of creative people out there who will do things that we do not expect? We've got to let them loose on our stuff, and so they can do beautiful new things. Disruption is a big problem. The Bank of England has absolutely no idea how to deal with the effect of the mobile phone on the gross domestic product of the United Kingdom. All our economic models, 10 years on, unable to cope with the digital economy. But we can embrace the digital economy, the digital creativity out there, but it all costs money. Our contribution will cost money, and the digital creators out there probably will do it for free if we allow them to do it via hackathons and other things. But we have to be ready to serve those people. So in response to the two questions, what can the UN, let's face it, this is the UN, what can the UN do to shape the future? Well, there can be a UNUSA Open Data Charter, which says, point one, for data to be fair, they've got to be there. So the first thing is all data ready for everybody. And two, what leverage can UNUSA do? They can talk to delegates and encourage individual governments to set aside the money that's already there, earmarked for development, to be put into this project. Either for people like us or other players, maybe commercial players. But we can help collectively to decide which of those projects are good and which are not so good. So these are the two things that UNUSA can do. The UN provides cultural leadership in almost every area of human activity, and it should do so here. And then it should send out requests for government, individual government action to put money into this effort.
Thank you very much. And I like the idea to be disruption ready. I have to think about that. Just one comment. You mentioned that smartphones are the key today. Just as a question mark, we have to look at the future, so we have probably also to think about artificial intelligence, but just to look at the future.
The key today, the key tomorrow will be something else.
Yeah. So if we look to something that is on the longer term, we have probably also to look at new technologies which are knocking at the door right now. So, last but not least, Professor Ruffini.
Well, I feel always embarrassed to speak after somebody who is organizing a very systematic presentation and also speaking beautiful English. Therefore, I will do whatever I can, but I have some message to give you. I have heard about data. I think data are important only if they are used. And they are only if they are used for excellent work. This is my point, the key point, excellency. Changing our understanding of the universe. And not to be too nationalistic, like you spoke about England, but
I was being anti-nationalist.
well, anyway, anti-nationalistic. But anyway, Italy has given some beautiful example of people who have greatly contributed to the shaping of the knowledge of the universe, and has been a special mixture between particle physicists, astrophysicists, relativistic astrophysicists who have led to such a miracle like Beppo Sachs, or mixture. Beppo, particle physicist, discover many fundamental particles, but then apply this to astrophysics and to Beppo Sachs. Riccardo Giacconi was his student. And I remember always, and I feel sort of embarrassed when I hear that we need the picture of the galaxy or the picture of the outer object in the sky. Riccardo Giacconi has invented, as among the many instruments he developed, was VLT. And when he took me to the mountain down there and visit, it was clear that these 4 telescopes were the mind of a physicist who wanted to bring the light from all 4 in a working bunch, were to make the physicist analysis of the photons and the interaction. Therefore, this was already revolutionary when Riccardo did the VLT. But today we are facing a greater revolution. We are examining reality, photons, which comes from 10 billion light years away, and we are able to find the spectral changes of a tenth of a millisecond. And that sort of science is the dominating one now. Therefore, either you jump on this for great, excellent discovery, or the pictures, the things, the images are gone. It's not the way the great discovery are made, where a great success can come. There are a big activity going on in high-energy astrophysics, but I don't want to speak about this. These are all positive things, and just to insist that there is this sort of style, which high technology, high precision, which is going to dominate science, astrophysics, and the knowledge of the universe in the future years. And now and today, we are ready to have a new distance scale from GRB, almost ready. And that is going to change a lot. But let me, now that I said the positive thing and the style, which I would love to see this in the UN, but let me say 2 other things about the developing countries. Of course, all of us have been lucky to know somebody from developing countries which has done tremendously for their nation. Chandra has been an example. His cousin, mathematician, was also very distinguished, and he did a lot. Abdus Salam, poor Pakistani, did enormous things, but there are these people let's not neglect, let's not treat the developing countries as a developing country. The good people are all over. And especially if you look at Brazil, for example, it was just Beppo Occhialini going to Brazil and finding the 18-year-old son of the rabbi of Torino, Cesare Lattes, and do whatever he had to do. Developing world, yes, Brazil. But the key is excellence and data for striving for excellence. Now I'm concerned, and let me tell you my concern and a wish, if I may. I'm concerned because the world is becoming more and more rude. And I'm concerned from what I am seeing around in these weeks. For example, one of the great fortune we had was to have open access to the data through GCN, for example. Now we learn of a group who invented a new GCN for his group. And we have even, not to speak about people so far away, as the best instrument, Agile, who is participating in a knowledge in which they had to sign a document that they will not publish unless this fake GCN is acting. I mean, these are things very worrisome, very dangerous. Okay, this is point. The resolution of UN should take care of keeping the standard of liberty and openness that we have been in the tradition of the Western civilization. If I may indicate a wish to make a progress in this direction, every other day I look at the data from the beautiful data of SWIFT, the beautiful data of Fermi. But every other day I see also the beautiful curve of Konuswind. Can we, but they don't give the calibration, they don't give the way to have information of this fantastic opportunity. Could we convince through our Roberto and convince them that the great possible contribution they have, give the details of this data for the good of the Russian and for the good of the community. And maybe in October, let's do together an effort in convincing them to share the scientific data, because it's for the good of everybody. Therefore, my strongest message is that possibly we are going to go through a very difficult period. Possibly. Hopefully not. But we have to get prepared. And at least to give a few signals in October. Konuswind has decided to share the data with the Gamma Ray and the many scientists from Russia to participate with the open community. Be careful that the same be applied to the Chinese instrument in the future. Because, yes, the same opening. I still remember Minoru Oda, my great friend, after discovering Cygnus X1 with Riccardo Giacconi and the black hole and so forth, going back to and I don't want to Japan, and said, well, I have done my instrument, I developed Cygnus X1, now I go back to Japan, I will start first from the rocket, then the instrument, and then we will make Japanese scientists from space. Beautiful, Minoru did that. But let's be frank with our colleague Japanese. Let's share the data. Let's share this great adventure. And the key phrase is the one of DuPont, the one director of the DuPont factory, which was making nuclear reactor in US. He said to John Wheeler, be very careful when you close the door of a laboratory, because you close in few less people in the lab than the one that you lock out from outside. I mean, this is a profound truth. We have to have scientists fight for opening, and to have everybody. It can be a smart Indian like Chandra, it can be a young boy 18 like Cesare Lattes, it can be anyone. But the data have to be available, but also not available, to be excellent data, significant, and to go on the way of the top quality. This is my main point, if I may say so.
Thank you, Remo. I can tell you that at least this morning, I don't know if the Brazilian presenter is still here. No, probably no. Has left. He left, but he mentioned BRICS, and you know, we have continuous contact with the, let's say, the various countries in BRICS together, and each and every one of them. The Chinese, at the level of the government, already confirmed their strong support to the Open Universe Initiative with me directly. So the Chinese, and by the way, I'm going to China just next Tuesday. The Russian Federation, we can work on them, and also with them. And I believe that they can join the let's say, this open approach. They've been quite open in the last few months, I would say. So I hope that this will continue. Japan is we are talking to them already. By the way, I was again talking to Roberto Battistone lunchtime, and I was mentioning just one example of our collaboration with Japan, and which is this Kibo Cube initiative. 2 years ago now, we decided to start to do something different in capacity building, and so we reached an agreement. We signed a memorandum of understanding with JAXA to issue a call. So the main goal was to have a CubeSat developed by a developing country. The selection is done. I mean, the call, the announcement is our announcement together with JAXA, but it's mainly us, the Office for Outer Space Affairs. The first one was in 2015. And we selected the first announcement was in 2015. We selected the first CubeSat last year in August. Daniel, correct me if I'm wrong, because I have all the dates in mind, but sometimes I have so many days in mind. So we selected the first CubeSat, which is from the University of Kenya, Nairobi in Kenya. And we are going to launch this CubeSat. JAXA is going to launch it free of charge. Also, the launch campaign is provided free of charge by the Japanese Space Exploration Agency, and they will deploy the CubeSat again free of charge. And then we were so happy that we started again the second round. 31st of March was the deadline for the second round. And as far as I understand, we have already other two interesting CubeSat. Now we have to decide together with JAXA which is the best proposal. But again, what I would like to underline is that, and I was discussing with Roberto, because by the way, the Italian Space Agency is also, and the university is supporting this CubeSat at the University of Nairobi, that we again are putting together developed and developing countries to help developing countries in really use the best talent they have. So, but what we want to do, Remo, is to provide them with the opportunity. We want to give them the opportunity to really demonstrate that they are very good in certain fields, and this is an opportunity more than just to try to have an average approach. It's just an opportunity for the best minds to succeed and to be exposed to the entire world. So I hope you agree. Okay, so if there is no other comment from the panel, and if we have still 5 minutes, yeah?
I have just one thing to say. Remo cited Agile, and actually Agile has a very nice application on a smartphone to look at the observation, the most recent observation, and the findings. So it already works at certain level on smartphones. It's not for answering, because you cited Agile, I recall it.
No, I cited Agile because they cannot publish the
No, I understood.
because they signed an agreement with the fake GCN. This is the thing which is atrocious.
No, sorry.
Of course, that Agile is a splendid instrument. There is no doubt that there is the best technology of CERN developed and so on. Is no doubt.
No, I'm
Even
not
the
saying
phone.
that. I was just
Yes,
citing because...
but the tragic point is this situation that is blocking, refereeing is blocking scientific collaboration, and this is the greatest danger today.
No, this is clear.
Marco.
What Enrico is saying is that the philosophy of our experiment
Yes.
is to be completely open.
Yes,
So we have an app
yes,
which everybody can use.
absolutely.
The philosophy of somebody else, it may be different, and we have to change it.
Thank you, Marco.
Still, I find frightening what is going on.
Yeah, so I have a comment from Daniel, and then I'll go for questions.
Just a very quick 1 minute reminder. This was only the first step in the whole process of Open Universe. We are here. The first proposal was in Scopus 2016 by Italy. It was agreed by all member states that it should be part of the preparatory work for Unispace Plus 50. We are right now in the second ballot in this point, the expert meeting here in Rome, and following what Bruna said, we wanted to invite first the expert community so that they could help us devise a roadmap and draft some recommendations that we could discuss later in the meeting in November, in which we'll also include the end users, the citizen scientists, universities, schools, which could have been missing partly from this meeting. But I just wanted to stress that in principle that was the two-tier approach that we devised to have a plan or roadmap or draft recommendations to have something more solid for our workshops. We decided to do first this expert meeting call. In the meantime, we may present the outputs of this workshop in the Scopus 2017 in the form of a conference room paper and a presentation. But I would like to extend the invitation of the Office for Outer Space Affairs for all the organizations to participate in the November meeting and propose contributions if you wish. The call should be open next week, and we will be opening a call for abstracts also to all end users, not only just the experts. So it will not be a meeting by invitation like this one. It will be open to anybody that applies. And the recommendations that we would have liked to have from this meeting would be tried to be refined during the November workshop, and they will be presented next year at Unispace Plus 50, and which will be a special segment of Scopus, and hopefully form part of the future of the Space 2030 agenda. Just for reference, although we didn't have time to have the second discussions, these were the example recommendations that I prepared even before the meeting, thinking of what could be the type of recommendations that could be a starting point that would follow on later to be discussed in November. We didn't have time to really discuss that, but I just noticed after the panel that some of them were actually matching what the speakers were saying. to explore the potential of education and citizen science projects in astronomy as a means of capacity building in developing and emerging countries. So that's our focus, developing and emerging countries, and we wanted to have a full session on citizen science in November. Disseminate and promote the adoption of S16 standards. It doesn't explicitly mention the virtual observatory, but maybe it should have explicitly mentioned it. Transparency and the fair guiding principles in science for data providers. And the other were just starting to put ideas which may not have been discussed because of lack of time. So if you have any other suggestions, proposals, or ideas of the type of recommendations that we should carry forward for the November workshop, we are more than welcome to receive them.
And I would add and everything enforcing open source code.
And enforcing is a very strong word, but maybe promoting and facilitating.
I mean, would be the if you have open source, you have no lock-in from big companies.
Yeah, so promoting and facilitating open source. Yeah.
Okay.
Then you're practical. Can you distribute this to the mailing list so that we can feedback?
Yes.
Absolutely. With
I mean,
pleasure.
it's a really very simple presentation. It only has,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, and just to complement, all the information on Unispace Plus 50, the thematic priorities, the 4 pillars, if you go on our website, there is a web page, I mean, there's a banner really when you open the website, which says Unispace Plus 50. You click and you find all the documents in a very structured way. So a lot of information, but well structured, so you have an immediate, clearer picture of what's going on. Please.
This discussion leads me to think that I understand a real constraint on what the open universe could be, and how it could be done. So if we assume that phones are a big part of this, and if we assume that public research is a big part of this, then it means that you need an app for your phone to support this. That's relatively doable. But in the era of big data, and big data is the good data, it's the interesting data, in that era, it also implies that there's specialized server-side software that feeds the phone, responds to the phone, does processing on the data, and sends back to the phone iteratively.
Correct.
So where does this specialized server software run? It has to run at the individual data centers. You cannot build an open universe facility here in Rome that does all that stuff, because the data transfer will kill you. And you would also have to have specialized knowledge of all the data collections in all the places. Who has that specialized knowledge? The data centers have the specialized knowledge of their data. So you have to invest in all these data centers if you want that server-side software to actually function right. Now, the Open Universe could be the ones who develop the requirements for the phone app itself, and could actually develop the phone app itself in coordination with the data centers. But it has to be highly standardized, and you should probably talk to IVOA about how to do that. But the server-side stuff has to be integral to the data centers, each one individually.
Yeah,
I fully agree.
Yep.
Fully agree.
no doubt.
It's what we are trying to do in Brazil and in Italy.
Yeah, considering that we have to cover the entire globe, and so we have to assess first, as I said, the status right now, so that probably there are also other, let's say, group of people or standards used in other countries, which could be helpful to be assessed. So the point now is that, again, we are not going to do anything which is a duplication by definition. This must be clear, because the feeling I have, to be very open with you, since I've been sitting here since this morning, is that It's this fear that we with Open Universe want to duplicate activities which are already in place since a bit and working well. Forget about it. It's never been our idea. It will never be our idea. What we have to do, because it's not our job, by the way. As I said, our job is to do the real top-level activities. For example, in the program we have for disaster risk reduction, we have a portal in more than one language where we put a lot of information, but then we link to other websites, to other databases, to other centers. So we are the entry point, as she was mentioning. And then everyone in the world knows that we, the UN, we are the entry point to the system. Everyone in the world.
But if you don't make the existing data centers don't support the functionality that you
That's
want
clear.
for phones
That's clear.
and for the public. So where are the investments going to be inside the data centers to support it? You can do all the portals
The
you want.
architecture has to be
Portal-
decided together. I
This
mean,
is what I'm
not
trying to say is
taking my
portals.
decision alone.
What I'm trying to say is high-level stuff, portals and the app on the phone. You need them, but you have to revise the internal stuff. These data centers won't do it themselves because they're not funded to support
Yeah.
citizen science, right?
Absolutely. But that's the reason why we need member states, and we need to understand if they want to invest, because we cannot do it without money. And neither the centers nor us. I mean, so we need money, so we need to understand if this is what they want. For the time being, we understand this is what they want. I mean, that this initiative is something that they want to, I mean, this one of the initiatives that they want to see presented in June 2018. What we are right now doing is to put together the project in order to be able to present, again, a project which is feasible for them. They have to put money on the table, and we have to present something which is feasible, at least probably in steps, because I don't expect we can collect so much money at the beginning. And clearly, if in the infrastructure, if in the architecture, we have the centers already working, already functioning, which need money, as Piero was mentioning, for sure, this amount of money has to be distributed in a way that the overall system is working properly. That's, in my opinion, was clear, probably not enough, because, probably it was obvious, but okay, now it's clear.
And if I can add just a bit of pepper. And then you can pepper. It's a plain translation from Italian. I mean, and then you maybe you can ask to different community, the one that is building infrastructure for high energy physics or for some other purposes, for great observatories like CTA or whatever, to provide you the platforms in order to interface your data to the telephone. This was, I mean, if there are some communities that are asking, there are some problems for data mining, exploitation, whatever, that are larger than the one of an observatory, and they're providing open solution. Then maybe could be interesting to cross the two customers, even if for them is not the main use case, could be a use case, and this could come from free. I mean, because could come for free. I mean, you invest as a country, because what I understood is that anyhow you don't have money, is the country. But if the country sees that developing a given technology, a given infrastructure, I mean, most of the projects for open platforms are EU financed by the European Commission. So, I mean, why United Nations should move in a direction asking money that on the other side the European Union is giving, or I imagine in general US or whatever. So one also should harmonize what is being created for other reasons.
Yeah, just to underline one point, among other activities, the Open Universe initiative is the only one for the time being which received a sort of pre-agreement from member states. all the rest is still under development. So this one is really becoming potentially a flagship initiative in June 2018. Just to underline again the vision of the Italian Space Agency in presenting this idea to member states, and the interest of member states, at least on paper, because they approved the idea that we have to work in preparing this initiative for 2018. And again, is the only one with a clear name, black on white. So it's important to underline this side of the story too. Pietro.
2 points. One more formal, COSPAR-wise. I think on behalf of the COSPAR president, I can affirm that COSPAR is ready, as I said, is fertilizing the field with two main tools that are capacity buildings that we do normally, and with roadmaps. So surely COSPAR is ready to lead a roadmap if necessary, or better, probably participate to any roadmap that you may, as UN office, see as a valuable tool to enhance access to universe data. Another point, completely different. I'm a bit puzzled that there are 1 billion of people in the world that have no access, and not to data but to water.
Yeah,
so which is our, I know you know very well, but what is our target? Our target for the 2 points that you mentioned in invitation letter, one was for scientists, and one for the citizen, people in the street. I think even the first target that is quite close as a variety of level, we are targeting for science, astronomical or scientific data, a fraction of the population that is of the order of 10% or so. So really we have to discriminate also, which is our target, I think, in terms of fertilization activities towards scientists. For the astronomical data, there is, I have a comment, but I don't want to open the Pandora box. Clearly, what Remo has mentioned is something that looks a closed door, but what we have to be sure in general is that the science data that are placed out and distributed among the scientists around the world are good data. We cannot claim a 3 sigma results as a great discovery. You need, in general, to validate what you discover. I mean, great discoveries means great statistics and great tests, great checks. So this is unescapable. So in some way, it's necessary to control the level of quality of the data. We discussed that this morning. And also be sure that what is released to the open public is valid. It's not some fake results or data as was mentioned, for example, by Enrico. So I think there are pros and cons, but we have to be sure that the data that are placed out are real data. I mean, we talk about gravitational wave. Everybody believes that gravitational waves have been discovered, have been not discovered, but detected. Okay, maybe not everybody, but there are at least 5 or 6 triggers. How many of these are real, and how many gamma ray bursts have been claimed in the past? For example, there is something that may be of interest, in particular from the President Tomasi. We are at the solar minimum. We see, for example, with a number of energy satellites, slide integral swift effects that were not known before because are connected with the solar minimum. We have to understand. We have confidence with the fast radio burst results that have to be checked. So the level of control is not anti-democratic. It's democratic, I think.
Okay, I'll I comment on the COSPAR side, and then eventually I'll give the floor to Daniel for additional comments. On the COSPAR side, I had recently a meeting with Len Fisk, and we decided to have a joint workshop for 2 days, co-chaired by myself and Len, in Vienna, the 22nd and the 23rd of May, where we'll together review all the thematic priorities, preparation of Unispace Plus 50, including the Open Universe Initiative, and this will lead to a document which is sort of a joint document that will be presented to the Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space, so that we will have also the formal opinion of the COSPER community in preparation of Unispace Plus 50, and therefore any comment from your side can be channeled through this formal approach that we are having. And by the way, let me say that this is the first time that we are having this kind of approach between COSPER and the Office for Outer Space Affairs, at least that I can remember.
I'm glad you mentioned because I couldn't. So,
okay, I did it. Okay, Daniel.
Just wanted to add just one comment. Of course, quality education is only one of the goals that we are focusing in. Clean water and sanitation is another one. And there are also very indirect benefits like no poverty. Maybe you cannot really reduce poverty from space, but if you raise the level of education, it doesn't matter if it's in astronomy or in any other science in developing countries, there are many indirect benefits, social and economic benefits that would feed into that country. And in particular, for example, you will reduce the poverty gap, you will reduce the gender equality gap and other problematics, even if astronomy doesn't seem to be the best target. It's education what we are trying to aim for. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
just a comment. Yeah, I think that you're right. I mean, if we go through these sustainable development goals, there are few that are directly linked to, or can be linked strongly to science of the universe in a broader sense. Well, yeah, for example, quality, education quality, partnership for the goals, that is another important point. I mean, we are all discussing about the free access to data, to work together, to share ideas, visions, and so forth. It's typical of the scientists for luck. Indeed, you may, I mean, Piero, you're right. I mean, 16, despite it's not maybe so directly linked, but again, working together means helping the peace. And sharing ideas means helping the peace.
Space diplomacy.
Yeah, space diplomacy, exactly. Then there are other indirect, reduce the inequalities. Indeed, education helps in reducing reducing inequalities. Then, if I speak more generally from space, indeed there are many others. Life below water, life on land, climate, everything is another kind of science from space, is what is looking down instead of looking up.
So thank you so much. I have just time for another question, last one, because then we go for the conclusion with Professor Battiston, please.
Okay, thank you. Just one comment. Little has been said about planetary science data, and I think that at the present time planetological data are public but not open, because yesterday I tried the new PSA on the ESA, and data are still not provided with the geometries. So I can download the data, but I cannot know where I am looking. I know that PDS4 is will be compliant with this effort, but a big wealth of data is standing on archives and are public, but not usable in this sense. Maybe Open Universe and the UN can afford this challenge of adding valuable information to data, because otherwise we have very, very, very much data that nobody can use. So, please, thank you.
I took note. So, if you don't mind, I would like to thank the panelists. Thank you very much for your contribution. And I invite Professor Battistone for the conclusions. Dove stai? Metti qua. Qua.
So, I'm very glad to have this opportunity to say a few additional comments about, I don't call it conclusion, but which are adding to what has been said so far, in particular in this last roundtable. This chart has a number of things on it, but if you look it carefully, it's very easy to read. The words have been chosen very carefully. Each word has been chosen very carefully. The drawing has been done correctly, and you get a message out of it. Many messages, but a clear message. There is no doubt that to communicate to a large amount of people, you need this quality of information. There is a tremendous amount of information behind these little buttons, because this is this synthesis, the outcome of many, many discussions, annoying meeting, struggle between delegation and so on and so forth. But at the end, this is a message to the world. And the fact that United Nations, in this particular case, UNOSA, is an open gate to the world, is a tremendous value of the project we are discussing today. So this tool is invaluable in content, in quality, because it opens, it gives a gate to the world. So maybe everybody in this room has a different understanding what open universe means. And many attempts of describing what open universe means has been given. Everybody has spoken from his own or her own experience. And maybe we don't agree on what is the best way. So I will tell my vision of open universe. I don't know if you have seen this movie, recent movie, The Passengers. Who have seen that? Very few of them have seen it, because you are a real scientist. You don't go to science fiction movie. You should. Because all the 95% or 99% of the people go to movie, and nowadays movies are very realistic movie about science, and they learn about things. So in this movie, which is a kind of a big ship which is traveling for many hundreds of years with people cryogenically sleeping and so on and so forth, but few of them are awake, and sometimes they cross through stars, and they are crossing to 0.5 times the speed of light. So it's a very all the simulation of relativity are wrong. Don't worry about that. They're typically wrong. But crossing to stars, they do like that, and they get the name of the star, how bright it is, the mass, the history, what about the future, what about the past, and they make like that, and something appears with all this information. This is my way of seeing open universe, to get access of information about the universe like that. So it's not even who was speaking about a cell phone. I'm much farther in the future than a cell phone. I want to see three-dimensional holograms telling me about the universe. Sooner or later we come to that. Having said that, I'm pretty sure that this will not be the open universe, because it's technically too complicated today. But most important, this is not the open universe. All the people, all the 99% of the people are waiting from us, because we do not know what they are waiting from us. In this room, there are not a single example of the remaining 99% of the people in the world, the one we are talking about. So maybe at a certain moment, we will have this kind of users coming in from the door. We ask them what you really would like to have as an open universe, what you will associate to open universe, what you will benefit from this kind of science. They will grasp the message and will say, okay, I want that. oh, I would like to see that, or maybe my future seen through the stars. 99% of the people of the world open the newspaper and look for the prediction of the future of the day through astrology. Is a fact. So maybe they want that. Maybe we can improve the accuracy of predictions. Maybe we can tell them something about how little truth there is in this kind of things. So we do not know what they want, but we are pretty well convinced of the fact that increasing the science awareness through open universe data, through astrophysical data, through astronomy science, is a value which we should share and make available to the world. This we know. We definitely know. And what has been discussed so far was mostly how to make this data available better to scientists to do better their job, which is great, because the various instruments are obviously instruments which are different calibration, format, and so on. I think what has been done by the virtual observatory type of efforts is incredibly important. But probably what we need for the rest of the people is something different, which we may have some vague idea, but working together, and together with UNOSA, which can see through these many, many doors and windows through the walls, through the very variety of walls, and delegation are a good interface to start this journey, we can possibly provide with similar tools to what is, on a similar base of what has been provided so far by this effort which are discussed today, we can do the next step, I would say cultural evolution, to provide something else, something different, something which is useful to this 99% or so of the population. The tools, so we have a goal, the masses, in a certain sense, sorry to say this old-time word. We have a tremendous wealth, UNOSA and United Nations, and the existing data, a tremendously valuable information. We have the agencies. ASI is a one which helps to start the process, but clearly this has to involve many more participant agencies, institutions, organizations. There is no doubt about it. We have a modern world based on the internet, which is exploding every day, increasing the capability, reaching more people. So we have all the tools to do a good job, and I think making this together is really important. How to organize that? So I will tell a story. The other day I was discussing another of those intractable problems, how to do space exploration in the coming 30 years. Around the table there were the typical suspects, China, Russia, ESA, Italy, France, ONU, NASA, everybody around the table. And there was a discussion, let's go that way, they jump this, they go down that. And clearly, but a certain was clearly felt as a difficulty, the organizational model for such a global enterprise. Because obviously when you go global, you do not want to have one which is guiding the others. Is a little, simple, important problem. So eventually was a very interesting comment by the Chinese delegation, which said, you know, we are used to this kind of organizational model like a fleet. A fleet is an ensemble of boats, bigger boats, smaller boats. The fleet may get together and organize its direction in a single direction because there are agreements into that, but each boat feel the captain of a given boat feel is a captain of a given boat, and each boat can carry its amount of wealth, of goods and rules and way of proceeding. But at the end of the day, the fleet, which is an organized system of autonomies, can get to the result of bringing a lot of wealth from point A to point B. I like this tremendously because everything which is really global has to be equal. has to be exchanges, has to be a network of things, building up of existing capabilities. Sometimes in a fleet you get one boat more or one boat less, depending on the purpose, depending on the quality and the content of the boat. But at the end, the organization has to work in this way. I think we don't have alternatives on the long run. Now we're in a starting phase. So in the starting phase, we have to provide some initial ideas. This meeting was tremendously useful, at least to me, but I think also to my colleagues working in preparing this meeting and the future action about Open Universe to understand a number of things. But it's quite clear that this has to be done in a collaborative way, starting from what exists. Adding this gap, the work, the effort is to bring what we have to the next scale and making it suited for this large amount of people type of benefit. So in this list of, there was a list of intermediate steps which separate us from next July, June, next
November.
No, next year. Next Union Plus 50 is next
June
28. Okay, so there is a November meeting for a further elaboration of what we are saying, more precise definition. I think out of this meeting today, we will really make a lot of benefit and propose to you at the next iteration, which will not be nothing between now and then with you. I think this connection, which is discussion, which has started today, they will continue, but we will provide at the end a much more refined proposal. I think it is the goal of Italian Space Agency to do that with your help. But I would like to also to add another things into this scheme, because many things have been said about developing countries, and indeed most, or at least many, if not most, of the users of this kind of those goals, in particular, better education, evolution, and also reduction of poverty. This is the poverty can be money, but can be education. Okay, so there are a lot of resonances in these various topics. So many of these countries deserve and need this kind of information to a level which can hardly believe. For us, getting one photo more or less on our phone is absolutely the same thing. We are flowed with information. And we can, because of education, we can pick up the one which are less wrong or better content. But there are conditions where this is not available. And any bit of information you get can change your life, can promote your professional education, can make your life better. So I think proposing this type of approach through UNOSA, which is extremely important, to these emerging countries, this investing in education, pushing them, supporting them, helping them in investing in space is extremely important. It's part of this open universe. And the Trento meeting, which some of you may remember, was a ministerial meeting with 42 nations participants to that, where it was focused on making the ministerial level aware of the relevance of education in the space field in order to promote the professional growth of those countries. Those countries will use satellite for many applications, but their people will not know how to do that unless they are trained. So this meeting made a manifesto, a statement, which has been shared by everybody, participated in the meeting, but they were there, Russia, United States, I mean, all the country, everybody, United Nations, of course. And the next meeting of this sort will take place in Kenya this November. I don't know if it is before or after the other one. And is our plan to bring the Open Universe agenda or the Open Universe proposal as a building block of this action to make the education in the science, in the space, in the STEM, as you often say, as a building block which can be recognized and made available in this particular case to the African countries but I mean, more will follow. So I think just some ideas, some comment, why we think this initiative is important, why we consider this partnership with UNOSA as a privileged partnership, which may allow us to get to another step in this important effort to make science really present to billions of people's lives. Thank you so much.
A questo punto direi che io vorrei ringraziare il Presidente dell'ASI perché sei sempre ispirante.
English, please.
Ah, sorry. Yeah, so it's, I mean, it's always very, very inspirational. Yes, indeed, I discovered recently that you're fully right saying that science fiction movies are quite helpful. I was not aware of that. I never liked them, but it seems that they're quite helpful in passing through certain messages. So which means that we have to look probably a little bit more also to the so-called storytelling, because sometimes we do a lot in space activities. We use technology to help and I mean to improve the quality of life on Earth. And with, I mean, at least in our case, we do a lot, but probably don't do enough to explain how good is what we do in space and space activities for the benefit of everyone in the world. Again, this Open Universe initiative, I mentioned that already several times. It's a flagship initiative, is outstanding, in my opinion, and I do hope that we can converge on a very good proposal with the help of everyone. By definition, we listen and we try to accommodate all the different standpoints. But let me just say something just to conclude. If we want to do something positive for everyone in the world, we need to think a little bit outside the box, outside our standard box, and try to think about the fact that together we can do a lot more than if we go ahead alone. Thank you, Roberto. Thank you, everyone, for your contribution, and I do hope that this is just the first step and that the collaboration with all of you will improve in the future. Thank you very much.
Benissimo.
Sometimes, certe volte non so più che lingua parlo, ma questo
È colmo.
è colmo. Non me ne ero accorta, parlavo italiano, benissimo.